And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Tuesday, July 3rd. I'm your host for today's program again, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories we read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryTV.com. And here are some of the news stories from the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Two fast-moving wildfires triggered new evacuations in Montana on July 2nd as firefighters battled a potent combination of lightning strikes, dry weather, and flamed whipping winds. The Horse Creek fire south of Hysham quickly grew from 3 to 9 square miles overnight. It was the largest of more than a dozen new fires sparked by the weekend lightning strikes. To the southeast, the 290 square mile Ash Creek fire jumped Highway 212 west of Broadus on July 2nd as well. There were 12 large fires of 500 acres or more burning across Montana on July 2nd, with more than 1,800 personnel involved in fighting the blazes. About half the fires this year have been human-caused, with lightning strikes responsible for most of the remainder. The largest fire is still the still growing Ash Creek fire, which is burning on and to the east of the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation. That fire was reported at 40% contained on July 2nd, with 16 residences and 22 outbuildings burned so far. Because the forward edge of that blaze was burning quickly through thick, largely inaccessible timber, firefighters were staying out of its path. Instead, they were concentrating on trying to contain the fire along the edges, according to Ash Creek Fire spokeswoman Kathy Bushnell. Another fire that ignited in recent days, the 3,100-acre Bad Horse Fire east of Crow Agency, was 60% contained by July 2nd. A debate over whether to expand the eligibility requirements to enroll as a Blackfeet tribal member is dividing the Montana reservation, unlike it has on many reservations across the United States and Canada in the last few years. On both sides, the bigger question is whether expanding enrollment will create greater unity or threaten the tribe's existence. For the past 50 years, the Blackfeet tribal eligibility has been determined by whether a person is at least 1/4 Blackfeet, meaning that at least one grandparent must be a full-blooded Blackfeet on the rolls. A majority of federally recognized tribes use that measure, known as blood quantum, to determine eligibility, according to the Oklahoma Indian Affairs Commission. But an organization called Blackfeet Enrollment Amendment Reform is collecting signatures for a petition seeking to change that standard. Its members want enrollment eligibility to include anyone who has proof of being the child, grandchild, or great-grandchild of an enrolled tribal member. Supporters say the change would lead to more tribal inclusiveness and unity. Those opposed to the proposed lineal descent eligibility include members of the Blackfeet Against Open Enrollment movement, who say blood quantum separates those with a close affiliation to Native American life and culture values from others with little or no personal connection to their ancestral heritage. The Blackfeet tribe in 2011 had 16,924 enrolled members, according to the Tribal Enrollment Office statistics, but there were about 105,000 people who identified themselves as Blackfeet Indian on the 2010 U.S. Census. The Blackfeet's original constitution, written in 1935, included a requirement that tribal members be at least 1/16 Blackfeet. The Constitution was amended in 1962 to raise that requirement to 1/4. All Blackfeet children living on the reservation prior to August 30th, 1962 were also included as tribal members, but in some cases their children do not meet the blood quantum requirement and are excluded now from tribal rolls. Robert Hall's parents are enrolled members, but with a 15th 64th blood quantum, he is not. He grew up on the reservation, speaks the Blackfeet language, and identifies with Blackfeet cultural values. Hall told the Great Falls Tribune that he believes blood quantum systems are racist. New York officials are holding on to a truckload of untaxed Indian-made cigarettes they seized, challenged the recent order of a state judge who said the state had to give them back. State police and the Cuomo administration say they are not changing their enforcement practices despite the court ruling. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has filed an appeal notice that temporarily halts the order of the state Supreme Court Justice David DeMarest. DeMain ruled on June 18th that there was no tax due on the 26,000 cartons of Signal brand cigarettes going from the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation to HCI Distributors, a subdivision of the Winnebago tribe in Nebraska, finding no legal basis whatsoever under current New York law or regulations to hold them. They were taken from a tractor-trailer stopped January 23rd at a U.S. Border Patrol checkpoint at Waddington in northern New York. Last November, New York administration officials said state law subjects unstamped cigarettes to seizure regardless of the origin of the destination. Representatives of cigarette manufacturers on the Akwesasne Mohawk Reservation in northern New York, whose business has been hurt by seizures this year, include 2 other truckloads, met with administration officials last week in Albany, but declined afterward to comment. HCI from Winnebago, Nebraska, sued state police, St. Lawrence County District Attorney Nicole Duvey, and her assistant Jonathan Becker, arguing it had legally bought the cigarettes from a business on the Mohawk Reservation and that it had accurate paperwork that specified its destination as the Winnebago Reservation in Nebraska. State police seized the tobacco. DeMain concluded no taxes were due and said no criminal or civil proceedings were ever begun, so the cigarettes should be returned. Here, the New York State Police, at the specific direction of the St. Lawrence County District Attorney, has seized property owned by the petitioner without a warrant and without commencing a criminal complaint, DeMain wrote. He rejected the state's argument that the cigarettes needed tax stamps. More than 150 years ago, tribes in western Washington ceded much of the state to the federal government in return for guarantees of salmon and other fishing rights. Now those tribes say their treaty rights with the U.S. are at risk because the region is still losing habitat that salmon need to survive. They say their treaty rights won't mean much if there's no salmon to harvest, and they're warning the federal government that they could resort to court action if more isn't done. The tribe's treaty rights, the basis for their economy, culture, and way of life are at stake, said Mike Graham, executive director of the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, an organization of 20 treaty tribes, including the Hoh, Upper Skagit, Puyallup, Tulalip, Naksuk, and Nisqually. Frustrated by the lack of progress in recovering salmon in Puget Sound and along the coast, the Western Washington tribes last summer took their concerns to the White House. In a report, they charged that the federal government has not lived up to its obligations under treaties signed in 1854 and 1855. The agreements preserve the tribe's right to harvest fish and shellfish in traditional grounds outside their reservation, a right reaffirmed in the 1974 Bolt decision, and others. The Pine Ridge Reservation may soon have its own first credit union. Debbie Matz with the National Credit Union Administration said the association is very close to approving a charter for a credit union that would serve the 3,500-mile square reservation. Matz is the association's board chairwoman and was in Rapid City this week to speak at the annual meeting of the Credit Union Association of the Dakotas. The credit union under consideration in Pine Ridge would be based in Kyle. The Rapid City Journal reports that the credit union is sponsored by the Lakota Fund's Certified Native Community Development Financial Institute. And that is another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you for joining with us and come back again soon.